Have you ever noticed how walking doesn't fail all at once, but quietly changes? One day you are still moving, still independent, yet something feels different. Your steps feel shorter. Stairs demand more thought. You find yourself watching the ground more closely, not because it changed, but because your body did. This isn't weakness arriving suddenly. It's your nervous system sending a subtle signal that something in the way your legs support you has shifted. And once that shift begins, the real question isn't whether it will get worse, but whether you understand what changed and how to respond before walking starts to feel unsafe. Walking is often treated as something automatic, something the body will always know how to do as long as we keep repeating it. But in reality, it is a skill that depends on strength, timing, and constant communication between the brain and the legs. Most people never have to think about this because for decades, the system runs quietly in the background. You stand up, you walk, you arrive, and nothing about it feels remarkable. But after 60, many people notice a subtle shift that is easy to dismiss at first. The distance you can walk might be the same, yet the way you walk feels different. Your steps shorten slightly. You hesitate before stairs. You feel more aware of where your feet are landing. Nothing dramatic has happened, but something has changed underneath the surface. What has changed is not the habit of walking, but the support system that makes walking feel effortless. Every step is actually a carefully timed sequence. One leg must accept your full body weight while the other moves forward. The hips stabilize the pelvis so you do not sway. The thighs control how quickly you load and unload the joints. The calves manage both balance and propulsion. All of this happens while the brain predicts what comes next and adjusts before you are even aware of it. When this sequence is strong, walking feels automatic. When parts of it weaken, the brain does something very intelligent. It slows you down, tightens your movement, and asks you to pay more attention. That increased caution is not failure, it is protection. Over time, however, protection has a cost. When walking becomes more guarded, the body relies more on habit and less on active support. Muscles still move, but they are no longer asked to fully engage or stabilize. The brain senses this and compensates by reducing stride length, limiting speed, and avoiding situations that feel unpredictable. This is why many people who walk every day still find stairs uncomfortable, getting up from a chair harder than it used to be, or quick changes in direction unsettling. These moments demand more than repetition. They demand strength and control at very specific points in the movement, points that habitual walking no longer trains. As this pattern continues, the stakes quietly rise. Walking may still be possible, but confidence begins to erode. People start planning routes based on benches and railings. They choose familiar paths over new ones. They hesitate in crowded spaces. None of this feels like a big decision in the moment, but each small adjustment narrows life just a little. The body is not broken, but it is being used in a more limited way, and the nervous system takes note. When strength is not called upon, it does not disappear suddenly. It simply stops being available when it matters most. This is where the distinction between habit and skill becomes critical. The habit of walking can persist long after the skill that supports it has weakened. And when that skill fades, walking demands more effort, more attention, and more mental energy. What many people interpret as aging is actually the nervous system working overtime to keep you safe with fewer resources. If nothing changes, that compensation becomes the default. Walking still happens, but it no longer feels easy or trustworthy. The important thing to understand is that this process is not permanent. The brain does not forget how to walk well. It simply responds to the signals it receives. When the legs are never asked to stabilize deliberately, the brain stops expecting them to. When they are, even briefly, the conversation changes. Balance sharpens. Weight transfer feels smoother. The body begins to trust itself again. The habit remains the same, but the skill underneath it starts to return, and with it comes a different experience of walking, one that feels steadier, quieter, and less mentally demanding, opening the door to a different way of moving forward. This educational content is not a substitute for medical advice and should be adapted with professional guidance if you have existing medical conditions. Many people believe that the best way to walk better is to walk faster, to push the pace, to take longer strides, or to simply do more of it. That belief feels logical because speed looks like confidence and momentum looks like strength. But the body does not rebuild movement in that order, especially after 60. Before speed can safely return, the nervous system must feel stable. Without that sense of stability, speed becomes something the body resists rather than expresses. This is why so many people notice that even when their heart and lungs feel capable, their legs seem hesitant. It is not laziness or weakness. It is the brain refusing to accelerate a system it does not fully trust. Every step you take is, at its core, a controlled fall. You shift your weight forward and rely on one leg to catch you in time. When stability is strong, this happens smoothly and without conscious thought. When stability weakens, the brain slows the process down to buy itself time. That slowdown shows up as shorter steps, careful foot placement, and a subtle stiffness through the hips and knees. None of this is accidental. It is a protective response. The nervous system prioritizes safety over efficiency, and it will always choose control over speed when it senses uncertainty. After 60, that uncertainty often comes from small losses in stabilizing strength. The muscles around the hips, knees, and ankles are not just movers, they are sensors. They tell the brain where the body is in space and how much force the joints can safely absorb. When these muscles are underused, the quality of information they send back declines. The brain responds by dialing down speed, because speed amplifies errors. This is why asking someone to simply walk faster rarely improves their walking. It often increases tension, reduces balance, and reinforces fear. The system is being asked to do more before it feels ready. What the body actually needs first is reassurance. It needs repeated experiences of controlled weight shift, steady single-leg support, and predictable joint loading. When stability improves, speed often returns on its own without being trained directly. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of aging movement. People chase pace when the real limiter is trust. The brain must believe that the legs will respond accurately before it allows faster motion. Until then, every attempt at speed feels effortful, even risky. This is why many older adults notice that walking slowly feels fine, but any situation that requires quick adjustment feels uncomfortable. Crossing a busy street, stepping off a curb, navigating uneven ground, or turning suddenly can trigger hesitation. These moments expose the difference between movement that is rehearsed and movement that is reactive. Stability training rebuilds that reactive capacity. It teaches the body how to absorb force, correct small errors, and stay upright without rushing. When that foundation is restored, speed becomes a natural outcome rather than a forced goal. There is also an emotional layer to this process that often goes unspoken. When stability declines, confidence declines with it. People become more self-conscious about how they move. They may avoid situations that require quick decisions or unpredictable footing. This avoidance further reduces the body's exposure to stabilizing demands, creating a quiet loop where caution feeds weakness and weakness feeds more caution. Breaking that loop does not require pushing harder. It requires moving in a way that restores control first. When stability is prioritized, something subtle but powerful happens. Movements begin to feel quieter. The body stops bracing so much. Walking takes less mental effort. The nervous system no longer feels the need to monitor every step so closely. This frees up energy, both physical and cognitive. Over time, speed emerges not as something you chase, but as something that feels available again. You notice yourself walking a little quicker without trying, turning more easily, stepping more confidently. These changes are not dramatic, but they are deeply meaningful because they signal that the system is reorganizing itself around control rather than caution. Speed has its place, but it is not the starting point. It is the reward the body gives you when it feels safe enough to move freely. When stability comes first, walking stops feeling like something you have to manage and starts feeling like something your body knows how to do again, opening the door to movement that feels both easier and more reliable over time. Many people are taught, directly or indirectly, to be cautious with their joints as they get older. Knees are treated as fragile, hips as delicate, and ankles as something to protect by limiting movement. This advice often comes from a place of care, but it leaves out a critical truth. Joints are not designed to carry load alone. They are designed to be guided, supported, and protected by the muscles around them. When those muscles are strong and responsive, joints experience less stress, not more. When muscles weaken or stop engaging fully, joints are left to absorb forces they were never meant to handle on their own. Every time you stand up, step forward, or change direction, forces travel through your legs and into your joints. Ideally, muscles absorb most of that force before it ever reaches the joint surfaces. The quadriceps help control knee bending, the glutes stabilize the hips, and the calves manage ankle motion and ground contact. These muscles act like shock absorbers. They slow movement, distribute pressure, and prevent sudden impact. When they do their job, joints move smoothly and quietly. When they do not, joints take the hit. As we age, muscle engagement often becomes less consistent. Not necessarily because muscles engagement often becomes less consistent. Not necessarily because muscles disappear overnight, but because they are used less deliberately. Sitting more, avoiding certain movements, or favoring one side of the body gradually reduces how well muscles share the load. The body adapts by shifting stress toward the joints. This shift is subtle at first. It may show up as stiffness after sitting, mild discomfort on stairs, or a feeling that knees and hips tire more quickly. Over time, repeated joint loading without muscular support can lead to inflammation, pain, and reduced confidence in movement. This is why many people experience joint pain even when medical imaging shows only mild structural changes. The issue is not always damage inside the joint. Often, it is a breakdown in how force is being managed around it. When muscles fail to engage at the right time or with enough control, joints are asked to stabilize and decelerate movement themselves. They are not built for that role. They are hinges and gliding surfaces, not brakes. One of the most important protective roles muscles play is during the lowering phase of movement. Sitting down, stepping downstairs, or lowering a foot to the ground all require muscles to slow the body under tension. This controlled resistance prevents joints from collapsing or absorbing sudden force. When this ability declines, movements become more abrupt. You may feel a jolt in the knee when stepping down, or a sharp pressure in the hip when sitting. These sensations are signals that muscles are no longer buffering the load effectively. There is also a timing component that matters just as much as strength. Muscles must activate at the right moment to protect joints. Even strong muscles can fail to do this if coordination is lost. This often happens with age, when the nervous system receives less consistent feedback from the legs. The result is delayed muscle activation, which means joints are exposed to force before muscles step in. Over time, this delay increases joint stress and reduces confidence in movement. Rebuilding muscle engagement changes this dynamic in a profound way. When leg muscles begin to share the load again, joints often feel less painful even before significant strength gains occur. Movements feel smoother, quieter, and more controlled. The body no longer braces as much, and tension decreases. This is why many people are surprised to find that strengthening exercises can reduce joint pain rather than worsen it. The muscles are not adding stress. They are redistributing it. There is also an emotional shift that accompanies this physical change. When joints feel supported, fear decreases. People become more willing to move, to step confidently, to trust their legs again. That trust reinforces muscle use, which further protects the joints. It becomes a positive loop rather than a protective shutdown. Instead of avoiding movement to spare the joints, the body learns that movement done with muscular support is what keeps joints healthy. Understanding this relationship reframes aging movement entirely. Joint comfort is not achieved by doing less, but by allowing muscles to do more of the work they were designed to do. When leg muscles share the load consistently, joints are free to move as intended, creating a foundation for walking, standing, and daily movement that feels safer, more efficient, and far less fragile over time. Balance is often thought of as something you either have or you do not, a trait that fades inevitably with age. In reality, balance is an active conversation happening constantly between the body and the brain. Every step, every shift of weight, every pause and standing requires sensory information to be gathered, interpreted, and responded to in real time. When this conversation is clear and timely, movement feels natural and automatic. When it becomes noisy or delayed, the body compensates by slowing down, stiffening, or avoiding certain positions altogether. The sensory side of balance comes from receptors in the feet, ankles, muscles, joints, and inner ear. These receptors send continuous updates to the brain about where the body is and how it is moving. The brain uses this information to make tiny adjustments, activating muscles just enough to keep you upright. Control is the other half of the conversation. It is the ability of the muscles to respond accurately to those signals. Balance fails not because sensation disappears or strength vanishes, but because the timing between sensing and responding becomes less precise. As we age, this timing can shift for many reasons. Reduced activity, past injuries, or simply moving in fewer directions can dull sensory input. When the brain receives less detailed information, it becomes more cautious. It sends out broader, stiffer commands to the muscles to compensate for uncertainty. This stiffness may feel like stability at first, but it actually limits the body's ability to make quick, fine-tuned corrections. Balance becomes effortful rather than fluid. This is why many people notice that standing still feels harder than walking. When you walk, momentum carries you forward and reduces the need for constant adjustment. Standing requires continuous micro-corrections. Each ankle sway or hip shift must be sensed and corrected instantly. If the sensory conversation is unclear, the body tightens to reduce movement. Over time, this tension makes balance worse, not better, because it limits the range in which corrections can occur. Fear plays a subtle role in this process. When the brain associates certain positions with instability, it amplifies protective responses. Muscles overcontract, breathing becomes shallow, and attention narrows. These changes reduce sensory sensitivity, making it harder to feel the ground or sense joint position. The conversation between sensation and control becomes strained. Balance then feels unreliable, reinforcing the original fear. This cycle can develop quietly without a single fall or dramatic event. Restoring balance means restoring this dialogue. The goal is not to overpower the body with strength, but to refine how information flows and how muscles respond. Gentle challenges that require controlled shifts of weight, pauses on one leg, or slow changes in direction retrain the nervous system to listen and respond more precisely. As this happens, muscles learn to engage with just enough force at just the right time. Balance stops feeling like something you must manage consciously and starts to feel instinctive again. An important part of this process is exposure. When the body is only ever asked to balance in predictable ways, the sensory system becomes less adaptable. This is why balance can feel fine at home but uncertain in unfamiliar environments. Uneven ground, crowds, or dim lighting increase sensory demands. Training balance in varied, controlled situations helps the brain remain calm and responsive when conditions change. The conversation becomes flexible rather than rigid. Another overlooked aspect is the role of the feet. The feet are the primary source of sensory input during standing and walking. When they are stiff, weak, or insulated from the ground by thick shoes or cautious stepping, sensory information decreases. Muscles higher up the chain then work harder to compensate, often too late to be effective. Improving balance often starts by improving how clearly the feet can feel and respond to the ground beneath them. As this sensory control loop strengthens, confidence returns. People begin to trust their reactions again. They move with less hesitation, take smoother steps, and recover more easily from small missteps. Balance becomes less about holding still and more about adapting gracefully. This adaptability is the true measure of balance, and it emerges not from forcing stability, but from nurturing the ongoing conversation between sensation and control that allows the body to stay upright, responsive, and at ease in motion. When walking becomes easier, the change is felt far beyond the legs. It shows up in posture, in breathing, and in how a person moves through the world with less hesitation. Mobility is often measured in distance or speed, but confidence is measured in willingness. Willingness to step outside without planning every detail. Willingness to move through crowds, navigate stairs, or change direction without stopping to think. When walking improves, these quiet permissions return, and they reshape daily life in ways that are deeply personal. Many people adapt to subtle walking difficulties without realizing it. They choose routes with fewer steps, avoid uneven ground, or time outings to avoid crowds. These choices feel practical, but over time they narrow experience. The body learns to move cautiously, and the mind learns to expect difficulty. Even when physical capacity remains, confidence erodes. This erosion often goes unnoticed because it happens gradually, protected by rational explanations. Only later does a person realize how much their world has shrunk. Easier walking interrupts this pattern. When steps feel lighter and more predictable, the brain relaxes. It no longer needs to monitor every movement so closely. This reduction in mental effort frees attention for other things: conversation, surroundings, enjoyment. Walking stops being a task and becomes a means again. That shift alone can restore a sense of normalcy that many people miss without naming. Confidence also influences how the body moves. When you trust your legs, your posture opens, your stride becomes smoother, and your arms swing naturally. These changes further improve balance and efficiency, creating a positive feedback loop. The body moves better because it feels safer, and it feels safer because it moves better. This loop is powerful because it replaces fear-driven adaptation with trust-driven movement. There is also an emotional layer tied to independence. Walking confidently supports the belief that you can manage your own needs. It reinforces identity as someone capable, not fragile. This belief affects decisions both large and small. People are more likely to say yes to social invitations, to travel, to explore new places. They are less likely to decline opportunities out of quiet concern for their own safety. These choices shape life satisfaction as much as physical health. When walking feels unreliable, people often withdraw slightly, even from things they love. They may still participate, but with caution that dulls enjoyment. The constant background assessment of risk is exhausting. Improving walking ease removes that background noise. The nervous system no longer operates in a defensive mode, and emotional energy becomes available again. This is why improvements in gait often coincide with improved mood and reduced anxiety. Confidence is also protective. People who move with assurance tend to recover better from minor slips because they respond rather than freeze. They trust their ability to regain balance, which makes them more resilient. This resilience is not about avoiding challenges, but about meeting them with calm readiness. Easier walking cultivates that readiness by restoring a sense of control over one's body. Importantly, this confidence does not require dramatic changes. It grows from small, consistent improvements that accumulate. Each time a step feels stable, each time a turn feels smooth, the brain updates its expectations. Over time, these updates reshape how the body anticipates movement. What once felt uncertain becomes familiar again. The world feels more accessible, not because it has changed, but because the body feels capable of meeting it. Easier walking, therefore, represents more than improved mechanics. It marks a shift from caution to engagement, from adaptation to participation. It allows people to move through their days with less planning and more presence. The restoration of confidence is often the most meaningful outcome of all, because it touches not just how far or how fast someone can walk, but how fully they feel able to live within their own space and routines again.